What's up, guys? Thank you so much for joining me for this episode of the Being Beautifully Honest podcast. And I wanted to have a little conversation. I am behind the wheel right now, getting this recording in, and wanted to just share something that's been on my heart for a little minute since I saw this news headline about George Zimmerman. And I wanted to get your thoughts on it, but it's just something that just came to me. And I'm wondering, is George Zimmerman going to get his OJ moment? And what I mean by that is, you know the story of OJ Simpson. If you don't, here's a little snippet. OJ Simpson was accused of murdering his ex-wife, Nicole Brown Simpson, and Ronald Goldman. And he was found not guilty, even though I believe a vast majority of people like myself did believe that OJ did it, but he got off and people were shocked. Some people were happy and cheered and celebrated, but many of us were shocked that he got off because people thought that the evidence was pretty clear, but he got off. And he did a lot of stupid things over the years. Just, some little dumb things here and there. I'm not going to go into all the details of, dumb things that he did. But then he eventually did, I guess, the ultimate stupid thing where they were able to bring him up on charges and find him guilty and lock him up for several years, many years later. So George Zimmerman, he was arrested, tried, but not convicted. He was found not guilty of murdering Trayvon Martin. Yes, he did do it, but the jury got him off, and all of the reasons, I'm not going to go into that right now. To be honest with you, I don't even know all of the reasons because I didn't follow the trial that closely. I did watch some of it here and there, but it was just a hard thing to watch. I have a son, and my son is around the same age that if Trayvon Martin was still alive, he would be today if he was still alive. So it was very hard for me to watch. And I hate to be like this, but when something is really hard for me, I just kind of pull back from it because I'm an extremely sensitive person, and I just couldn't allow myself to be in that state of depression because it's a very depressing thing. I don't know what that is like to lose a child, and I can only imagine that it's something that's extremely hard. So I didn't follow it that close. But George Zimmerman got off, and George Zimmerman, like OJ Simpson, he's done some stupid things over the years since he has been found not guilty and allowed to, be a free man, pretty much. He's gotten arrested maybe, a few times. His now ex-girlfriend accused him of domestic violence. He's been, pulled over by the police, several times. He auctioned off the gun that he used to murder Trayvon Martin. Like, just a number of different things. And it reminds me, in some ways, of OJ Simpson. And so now, George Zimmerman, oh my gosh. George Zimmerman, he is suing Elizabeth Warren and Pete Buttigieg, and forgive me if I didn't say the last name correctly because it's a little bit of a different name to say, for $265 million over quote-unquote defamatory Trayvon Martin tweets. The lawsuit alleges the candidates acted with actual malice. It is some freaking bullcrap. Okay, so the article says George Zimmerman, who shot and killed Trayvon Martin in 2012, is suing Democratic presidential candidates Pete Buttigieg and Elizabeth Warren for $265 million each now. That's each. Claiming they defamed him in tweets. So the tweets are by Pete Buttigieg. Says Trayvon Martin would have been 25 today. How many 25th birthdays have been stolen from us by white supremacy, gun violence, prejudice, comma, and fear. And then it says hashtag Black Lives Matter. And then Elizabeth Warren's one tweet. My heart goes out to at Sabrina Fulton and Trayvon's family and friends. He should still be with us today. We need to end gun violence and racism. And we need to build a world where all of our children, especially young Black boys, can grow up safe and free. Okay, those are the two tweets, one each, by Pete Buttigieg and Elizabeth Warren. And for those single tweets, George Zimmerman, and when I say George Zimmerman, I'm actually just naming him because he is the plaintiff, but he didn't actually file the lawsuit. He had an attorney to file the lawsuit, and I'm going to get into that in a second. For those single tweets that each of them did, he and his attorney have filed a lawsuit against these presidential candidates for $265 million each. What in the world? Like, are you freaking kidding me? For defamatory statements. First and foremost, okay, we all know that George Zimmerman was the one that killed Trayvon Martin. So, okay, that goes without saying. So they didn't name him in the tweets. They were focusing on Trayvon Martin and the fact that he would have been 25 if he were still alive. Those are facts. Now, they did not call Trayvon Martin's killer, George Zimmerman, a racist, but let's be honest, they didn't have to. This lawsuit is so frivolous, and the fact that it has even been allowed to have been filed, I believe that the attorney that is representing George Zimmerman should be either censured by the state bar that he is licensed under, or he should be disbarred, because this is the definition of a frivolous lawsuit, okay? Let's be clear. For the most part, unless you're suing someone in small claims court, where you can just go and file the paperwork and, you know, have someone served, and whether they show up or not, like, it is what it is. Other than that, when you're filing a lawsuit for over $5,000, that is out of the hands of the small claims court, and then you're going into the court of common pleas. Most people need an attorney to represent them in that. And I was a legal assistant for 12 years, and let me tell you, we used to get so many phone calls. The first law firm that I ever worked in, I worked in for 5.5 years, and that law firm handled employment and labor law cases for plaintiffs. So they did not represent the companies or the defendants. They represented those who felt like they were wronged in some way, either racial discrimination, wrongful termination, sexual harassment, you know, all of these different things that fall under the guidelines of having either hostile work environment or being dismissed or terminated from a job, and you feel like you have the right to sue. Now, people would call, they would have consultations, and more often than not, the attorneys would say, you know, there's really nothing that we can do for you. You don't really have a case. Not saying that you weren't wronged in some way, but under the guidelines of the laws, it would be a really hard case for us to prove in the court. And most attorneys are not going to represent you if they don't feel that in some way, shape, or form they could win. It's never a guarantee, but they will just take a case just because you say you have one. So there's that. Now, even with cases of employment discrimination, now, if an attorney felt that someone may have a case, it would have to be presented to the EEOC, and that stands for the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. And they would have to send all of the findings and facts, and then the EEOC would have to then review everything and determine whether you have the right to sue. And if they came back and said that you did not have the right to sue, then it would not go any further. If they said that you had the right to sue, then things would start to progress and move forward, where a lawsuit would be filed and then the litigation would move forward. More often than not, things would drag out and take several years. And when it may be to the point of a court date is being scheduled, they may go to mediation before that, or they may, just decide to settle. Or sometimes things would start and the proceedings would begin, and then during the process of the trial, there would be some type of settlement that would come about. Because let's be clear, it takes more money to take things to court than it does not to. So the attorney that is representing George Zimmerman in this situation is asinine. And I believe that this attorney needs to have complaints filed against them, and they need to be censured by their state bar, and then maybe possibly disbarred, because this is the true definition of a frivolous lawsuit. $265 million lawsuit against these people because they did a tweet regarding Trayvon Martin and just talking about racism and gun violence and fear as a whole. George Zimmerman is really being persecuted right now, and he cannot take it. And that is why he is continuing to be heard about in the news instead of just crawling under a rock somewhere or just going off into oblivion where we never hear about you anymore and just living your life. We have to continuously hear something about this dude. It seems like every year or every other year, it's something about this dude in the news. And it was the same way with OJ Simpson. It was like, you're free. Why don't you just go and be free? Why do we have to continue to hear negative things about you in the press and in the news? You just cannot go away. But my opinion is George Zimmerman is being tormented. He's being persecuted in his spirit. He knows that what he did was wrong. Okay? He's feeling guilty. He got off. And my mom has a saying, you may get by, but you never get away. When people do wrong, they may get by, but they never get away from it. And he cannot get away from what he did. He cannot get away from what he did. And OJ Simpson, whether you believe it or not, I believe if he didn't do it with his own hands, he knew about it and he had something to do with it. And he couldn't get away from it. And he was being tormented and persecuted in his spirit. And that is why you constantly heard something about him in the news over and over again, something negative about this or that or the other that he was doing or did, instead of just hearing about him going and playing golf. You get by, but you never get away. So I don't know when, I don't know how, but I believe that George Zimmerman is going to get his OJ Simpson moment where somehow, some way, he's going to eventually get caught by something. He's gotten off on several occasions, but it's bound to happen. Even if the dude lived to be 80 years old and then at the age of 81 something happens, something is going to happen to him. He's going to get his OJ moment. And I want to know what you guys think about it. Do you feel like he's going to get his OJ Simpson moment? I just believe that is why he cannot stay out of the news. You're filing a $265 million lawsuit against Elizabeth Warren and then another $265 million lawsuit against Pete Buttigieg because they did single tweets and they didn't call him out. It was about Trayvon Martin. Why do you even look at what they're doing? Why do you even care? Anything that comes up about Trayvon Martin, he's got something negative to say about it. He said negative things about Jay-Z because I guess Jay-Z did a documentary. I don't want to say he did the documentary, but he was involved with a documentary regarding and about Trayvon Martin. He sued Trayvon Martin's parents. Like, what piece of scum? You killed their child. Their child is gone forever. And you were found not guilty. Is that not enough? Now you're suing their parents too? Like, what in the world is wrong with this dude? he definitely has his OJ Simpson moment coming. I don't know when it will be. I don't know how it's going to happen, whether it's him being actually convicted of something or losing his life in some way, shape, or form. I just believe that he is going to get his OJ Simpson moment. Just continuously doing stupid things. OJ Simpson, the ironic thing was he went to prison for armed robbery of his own memorabilia. He went to prison because he held up some people that had his stuff. And he went to jail for many years for that. So it's like, yeah, you got by, but you didn't get away. And eventually it caught up to you. And I think he still didn't get his stuff because he still owed the civil judgment to Ronald Goldman's family that sued him in civil court and won for being responsible for the death of Ronald Goldman. I can't remember if Nicole Brown Simpson's family sued him in civil court, but I know Ronald Goldman's family sued him in civil court because I always remember those interviews. Ronald Goldman's father and sister were, constantly out in the media, doing that. And I can't blame them because, they lost their loved one and they believe that OJ Simpson either did it or has something to do with it. And nobody really knows what that feels like unless you've been put in a position where you lose a loved one to a tragedy, and then the person that you feel is responsible for doing it, and you felt the evidence was there to support that person did it, is walking around scot-free, and you did win a civil judgment against it, but you can't even collect on it. I don't know what that feeling is like, but I have a civil judgment against somebody that stole property from me and money from me many years ago that I can't collect on because the loser doesn't have anything that I can collect, that is in his name at least. So I'm just saying, I believe that George Zimmerman is eventually going to get his OJ Simpson moment. And whoever that attorney is that is representing George Zimmerman, they need to have complaints filed against this dude with the Bar Association. And he should be censured and fined or maybe even disbarred. I'm not the one to participate in the cancel culture type of thing because, if people aren't able to work, then how are they going to eat? The Bible even says, if a man doesn't work, he doesn't eat. So, to take away someone's ability to earn money so that they can pay their bills, what are they supposed to do? Become homeless or live in a shelter and live on welfare? I'm not saying that will be that person's plight, but shoot, if George Zimmerman is making out and living and doing okay, then his attorney will be all right having some complaints filed against him and having a censure or fine issued against him, or maybe even disbarred, because I don't know the background of this attorney, but this sounds like the MO of an attorney that has filed some other frivolous lawsuits in the past. Doesn't sound like anything new to me, because the fact that he came out the gate with this huge amount, $265 million lawsuit against each person that he's not going to get. But yeah, it's ridiculous. And yeah, I believe George Zimmerman has his OJ Simpson moment coming. You guys let me know how you feel about it in the comment section. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Being Beautifully Honest podcast. I am Elizabeth, the Minister of Beauty. Thank you so much for liking, commenting, subscribing, and sharing. And until the next episode, I am Elizabeth, the Minister of Beauty, here to share the Bible. That's business, inspiration, beauty, life, and enjoyment. And I hope you all have an amazingly blessed and beautiful day.